So today we're talking light, and if this is your first video, my name is Jill. This is my first winter off-grid in the mountains of Arizona. I'm just going over what I've learned. So we're going to take a deep breath before the wind kicks up and messes up the audio even more. And I'm going to tell you about my 978 million different attempts to light the horse trailer in the dark of winter. Stay tuned. Deep breath. See you on the other side.
I need my soul to scream out. Tell me how do we get so brave? Tell me how do we get so brave?
So this is going to be one of those kind of long talky videos where I'm just going to show you a lot of stuff and tell you what I used, how it worked, what I liked, what I didn't like, just to save you some time and money, because I experimented with almost everything and have come away with my favorites and my not favorites, why, and what I'm going to do hopefully next winter. So let's begin. There's nothing about winter that's worse than sitting in the cold and the dark. So I made a heat video. You can catch that on the playlist below. But the other component to that being cold was sitting in the dark. And what I had done when I was hooked up with electricity, as you know, I was 10 years in my tiny trailer and always had electricity. And so I loved my lighting. I used just those Christmas lights, kind of low light, had that kind of magical feel. And so they just sucked up too much energy out of my little power pack. So I had to find alternatives. And I'm going to show you an insert here. I didn't want to take them all down because I have them wrapped up. What I ended up doing this year was solar lighting, and that was sort of an evolutionary process. And to be honest with you, I didn't get the ones I wanted, but I like them pretty good, and they worked out okay. And the ones I ended up with were called fairy lights, which aren't as bright as regular solar lighting. So they create a very dim, kind of warm ambience. But I don't know if you can see the window back there, but that's the solar panel that I use. So I charge it every day, and then I run the lights at night and in the morning. And that works really, really well. And I don't like harsh lighting. So those fairy lights are very warm and very glowy and are enough to kind of get around without tripping on yourself. But they're not good for reading, and they're terrible when you're contrasting them to like your phone. Then you turn your phone off and you're blind. And so that bright screen light, I know you can dim it, but I'm just saying that bright on and off contrast can be a little difficult. So that's one thing I did. That's one thing I'll continue to do. The negative around the fairy lights or any kind of solar lighting that comes off one of those tiny solar panels is that inside the wiring is extremely fragile. I had to do some resoldering of those. Super tiny, so I don't expect it to hold on very long because it was easy to pull the wires out the first time and break it. Any kind of handling, and those lights in and of themselves just don't tend to last that long. It's just like those Christmas lights. They don't go all year, so I would buy them for like $2.50, $3 at Christmas time, get me enough boxes to get through the year, repeat. So love the solar lights, the fairy lights, not great long term if you're talking about years in a grid down situation. And they're not free, and they're not really that cheap if you're going to get good ones. So that's the first thing. I love those. My next favorite was really my oil lamp. And the same reason I like the fairy lights, I like this. It gives a very warm, glowy feeling of warmth. I love that there's no wires, there's nothing to plug in. But the negative, it would run me, one of these is almost $10 a month just for oil if I'm running it 4 to 6 hours at night and in the morning. So it's not really cost effective. The other thing that I discovered, and luckily just in time, is when the stove would get so hot, this would heat up and the flame almost blew out the glass. I caught it just before it got too hot and I could turn it off. So it's a little bit dangerous. The other thing I don't like about a live flame like this is that I don't feel safe leaving the trailer for extended periods of time with a live flame going, because there is oil if the dog were to knock this down, or more likely I was to knock it down. Between the flame and the oil spilling, you've got a terrible setup for a huge, oh my God, I just set my trailer on fire moment. That happens sometimes with propane heaters, but we're not talking about that here today. Now we'll get into all my experiments. So one of the lights I experimented with, this is battery operated, but it takes D batteries, and between it just being so cold and batteries made so crappy, this just wasn't an effective option, but it was an awesome idea. It's made for tents to hang. What I loved about this light is, in addition to the light itself, it had a fan, and so my plan was to hang it above the wood stove to push the heat down, pushing the hot air into the cold air and try to get some more circulation. So that actually worked pretty good. The light was just okay, but I was really disappointed with the fact that the batteries just don't last. And if you were to buy really super high quality batteries, it would get to be very expensive, in addition to the fact that the intense cold or the intense heat of summer just cream your batteries, and so you don't really get much life out of them. So this was an awesome idea, but not so awesome in execution. A couple of ones that I have outside that I don't have in my hands. I have 3 different types of lanterns. They all have batteries. One has a crank, which FYI, I'm never going to do that because my arm is going to give out before I'm going to get any long-term light, though great in an emergency. But again, you're having that battery issue in which they just poop out. That is why I have not used any kind of real lanterns, because they're okay, but again, I just can't deal with the batteries. So this, though, is one thing I did like and I kept. My favorite thing about the horse trailer and my favorite thing about these 2 lights is they have magnets on them, and because it's a steel horse trailer, this has been awesome. So one of the things I do with this light is I just hang it up for the back half of the trailer, and I turn it on and off as I come out. Now these take AAA batteries, so it's not as expensive, but it gives me some lighting without having to do a lot of complicated, just have to push the button. So I was really happy I got this, plus it's, easy to carry. It would be easy to travel. So this was a positive purchase. It does a good job of giving me enough light to kind of maneuver in the dark, but it's not a good ongoing light option, again, because the batteries poop out. This baby is my favorite. It has a battery, a magnet. You can hang it. It has a USB power out, power source in. You can't see it here, but there's 4 little lights that will tell you where it is in the charge process, and it has 5 different light settings, 3 kinds of white light and 2 kinds of red flashing or red constant lights. But it's just a really good quality light. It's USB charged, so it takes a while to charge up, but it lasts a couple days. A lot of the USB stuff poops out in an hour or 2, depending on how intense you want that light. But this has been my favorite light. I went to go look to see about buying another one, but this one is pretty expensive. It was almost I think it's $25 now, and there were a lot of other ones that were less money, so I want to do a little more research before. But this is my favorite little light, if you can see that. So if you were going to be off-grid and you're going to have access to USB charging, this would be the light, plural, I would get. So when it came to reading, I was getting super irritated about sitting in the dark. So this is just a clamp and a reading light. So this isn't really anything spectacular, but it has 3 different levels of white light. Plus you can turn it up or down as you would like. It's USB only, so there's no charging. So I was just putting this into my battery pack, but it doesn't pull a lot of light or power, but because it was pulling some power, and I was having scarcity issues with my battery pack, I got this little thing. Now this is a light power pack solar. So this is an excellent emergency light. It's so funny. Any type of light at all, no matter how strong it is or not, it will start to charge. But it has a 1 and a 2 volt amp output. And what I do is I just charge this during the day, and then I use this at night or in the morning as I would like to be able to read or write or do something where I actually can see what I'm doing and I'm not in the warm glowy light. So this has been a good buy. Except, and I don't understand enough about solar, is that I can have like almost no pull on this thing, and I can charge it all day in the sun, and I never can get it to be completely charged. So I don't know how that works with solar and why I can't get a full charge. If I plug this into the battery pack for another hour, it will go up so there's no blinking and a full charge. So I don't know enough about solar why that happens, but I cannot get a full charge on this thing, which I know depletes its long-term life. Another obvious, don't leave home without it. This is my superpower flashlight, so I suggest that you invest in good flashlights, little ones, big ones. What I like about this light, though, is I have multiple ways to charge it. I can charge it with USB, I can charge it in the wall, I can charge it with 12 volt. So I have and it also takes battery. So I was really happy with this little flashlight because you just need a flashlight, especially in the dark. You would be amazed at how many times some of my other lighting just doesn't cut it, and I don't want to go through a lot of hassle. So if I just drop something on the floor in my warm glowy light, I gotta whip out the flashlight, and I have a couple of them just to find things. So that's what I have in terms of my belongings. The other one that I couldn't find, which is somewhere, is candles, and I haven't used a lot of candles this year because they're expensive to buy, and they're not a good return on your investment. But I am going to go forward in the future to try them. So I just ordered 30 pounds of wax, and I'm going to try to make my own candles. Just in terms of burn time, I think it's, I forgot if it's an ounce or a pound, but I think it just might be an ounce. But I'm going to see if I can get enough return on my investment for it to be cheaper to use candles, because I love not having to plug things in. All this technical stuff is awesome, and if you want real light other than the sun to read and to see by, you pretty much have to go with some kind of battery or USB or AC/DC powered item. One of the things I haven't covered, because I did not wire this horse trailer for DC volt, is there's lots and lots of RV lights that are like 5 volt. They pull almost nothing. I have them in the white trailer, but what I learned when I was living in that white trailer is I never used them because they were on the ceiling or under counters, and I never turned them on. In fact, I even had invested in some really pretty nice lights, and I just never used them. And so one of the reasons I decided to not 12 volt wire this trailer was because I never used the lighting. And so that was just my personal preference, but there's lots and lots of 12 volt lighting that I don't have that you should explore, especially if you're going to have a 12 volt or 18 volt or 24 volt, however you're going to wire up, if you're living in a trailer or you're looking at a battery solar opportunity or option. I did not want that, so that is not really something I'm reviewing, only because I had it for 10 years, never used them. I liked having my light for reading where I was, and I liked my ambient lighting to be kind of softer and not just directional and pointing at me, and I couldn't move it. That's the thing I love about this light, is I can move it around and I can put it anywhere I want it or I need it. So I love this light. The sun is the only other obvious discussion we would have about lighting. And so that's what I use. Now, in review, lighting is really the biggest issue is going to be in the wintertime, because you're going to have an extended period of darkness. I get up really, really early, and so I have 3 to 5 hours of morning time light that I need, and maybe only 1 or 2 hours of PM light. So that's something you have to judge for yourself, how much you sleep. But I really like being awake in the dark in the morning. And so I do that for heating reasons, as I mentioned before, but that's just my natural rhythm. So it's something that's very individual to when you need your lighting and how much you're going to use and what you're going to use it for. But my number one takeaway from this winter is I do not like sitting around in the dark and the cold. My number two is I don't like futzing with all the charging stuff. So I'm going to experiment with candles and see how that goes for just ambient lights in addition to the solar lights, because I really like that simplicity that does not involve having to take things apart and keep charging them all the time. In terms of costs, there's no such thing as free lighting other than the sun. So people will say, oh, these are really cheap, but grid up, grid down situation, you have to think long term. What's going to hold out the longest, right? My little fairy lights are not going to hold out. The oil lamp, you need replacement wicks and you need replacement oil. Batteries, you need rechargeable batteries and hope that they don't poop out. But again, the cold just kills everything that is battery. Candles obviously have been around since as long as people have been able to figure out how to make candles. So that's one of those things that will be renewable if you have access to beeswax, to animal fat. The stuff I bought was soy, which obviously isn't going to be soy wax because it has a lower melting point. So that's obviously not going to be a renewable source if we go grid down. And if we really go long-term grid down, you're not going to want to be blazing light in the darkness like, hey, what's that person got over there? So the other thing you need to think about is how much you're going to black out your windows depending on the intensity of your light. Now, one of the things I've noticed is with my fairy lights, even with just minimal window blocking, you can't really see anything. I don't have real good shades yet in my window to block out, full blackout light. So, grid down is going to have to be a safety conversation about how much light you really want to shine and draw attention to yourself. Part of that will be investing, if you can, into a night vision. I have one. It's awesome and it's cool, but I have mixed feelings about if I saw somebody sneaking up on the trailer in the middle of the night, I could see them, but I still don't know what I would do about it. So it's one of those things. It's an awesome idea. It's great to have. But the reality is it's going to freak me out if I see people crawling around outside trying to rob me or break in. So, but I would, if you are serious about being prepared for a grid down, I would really look into some kind of night vision. But we're having that same conversation about battery power. I don't know if there's USB charged night vision. Mine's batteries. Same problem. So that's kind of it. There's lots of, there's the lights from the fire. I chose on my wood stove to not get a glass front on my fire because in my mind I was going to be sleeping with the stove going and I didn't want that extra light. The reality is I can't really sleep with the stove, and so that might have been a nice feature to have with glass in the front of the wood stove. So I think that's kind of it. That's what I'm doing. So that's my experience with lighting this year. I just wanted to try everything and see what my best takeaways were. But again, the thing that's becoming most important to me is simplicity and lack of clutterness and lack of constant time and attention around it. So there's a big difference between making a candle and having it last for a few weeks versus every single day having to futz with making sure I have power for the next day, having to ration it if it's in the storm, because my power supply is dwindling. So there's just a lot that actually goes into it, right? Who knew? I'm looking and I don't see any audio recording. If there's no audio, all right. So that is today's discussion as usual. But I hope you learned something. We're going to take a deep breath, and I, my friends, will see you on our next episode. And I'm not even sure what I'm going to cover yet. Deep breath. Have an awesome day. See you next time.